The Finance Advisory Committee to order. Clerk, call the roll.
Terzinski,
Here.
Chrome,
Here.
Neely,
Here.
Verbic, Conlon, Parch, Peddle,
Here.
4 present.
We do have a quorum. Is there any member of the public that would like to address the committee before we begin tonight? Hearing none, let's move to the approval of the minutes. The last meeting that the Finance Advisory Committee met separately was actually last July, and therefore we are charged with approving the July 12th, 2016 minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I wasn't there.
It's okay. That's
I will
according to
second.
the rules. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. All right. We have but one item on the agenda tonight, and we will stick closely to that agenda. But I think it's helpful both for the committee and for the general public who are watching to put tonight's meeting into context. This is the first meeting related to the fiscal year 2018 budget process. Normally, at this time of the year, we would be feverishly working on holding workshop meetings with respect to the budget process. But we changed the fiscal year, and so this meeting is, in a sense, 6 months earlier than it seems to be on the calendar. And so we are actually equivalently meeting in early December for what would have been the previous year's budget cycle. That is why tonight's meeting is a critical meeting, and it's one that we had promised the city, we had promised the citizens, and we had promised the committee that we would get an early start in the process, and that we would do so as a committee to increase our ability to start early in the process and to provide some structure for the budget process. That said, if we look back to the minutes of the previous meeting, it's instructive that there are a couple things that I would like to at least start with, and the city manager and finance director Haley may not be able to answer this off the top of their head, but I believe that if you are not able to answer tonight, that it would be helpful to have an update for the city council's next meeting. I had a citizen quite rightly follow up to ask about the status of the library's levy. And this is the time, as tax bills are coming out. The last time I checked, they were not on the web, but it would be helpful to reconfirm that the library has not gotten their money. I don't think that they have. And second of all, given that we have a new library director, there was some concern that there be a reiteration of the commitment that has been made for all of the extra levy dollars. Well, actually, the extension, the levy, the billed property taxes to be refunded to taxpayers once the library gets their money. So I wanted to follow up on that because I had promised this citizen, but I also promised when this originally came up that we would follow up as each year's tax bill came out to say we haven't forgotten. And finally, some preface to tonight's discussion. This is a discussion that I'm very proud that we're having. It's taken us a long time to get to tonight's meeting. One of the things that we as a committee and me as chair had made a commitment to was the 5-year financial plan, and to I like to call it 5-year strategic financial plan, and that we would not be dropping that. And in the interim, since the last time that we met, there were approximately 10 examples of the way that various communities, and I've been told that I don't think that any of the examples that were provided just by chance were from Illinois, but this is something that really is not specific to the structure of government in Illinois. But Member Verbic and myself provided about 5 examples each to city staff regarding what some other communities had done. And over the last couple of months, I've met with city staff to go over what the expectations of the committee were. And what we have tonight is just a template. This is not something that is real, except in the sense of the structure and in the sense of what we would be trying to do. There has been a lot of concern within the city, and I might add within the profession across Northern Illinois, that staff time in communities as we continue to be under fiscal stress is something that we have to manage very, very carefully. And in doing so, one of the emphases in the conversations that the city manager and the finance director and I have had was I emphasized that we start with data that we already have, and in many cases it's going to be a matter of re-aggregating that data. For example, there's a lot of information in the comprehensive annual financial report that could be taken and put into a 5-year strategic financial plan in such a way that you're restructuring, putting more years in there. An example that I used in our discussions was, how have the largest property taxpayers changed over the last 10 years? You know, has there been a change? How have the largest employers in the community changed? You see 1 year of that in the comprehensive annual financial report, but unless you go and you take 10 years of comprehensive annual financial reports and put them next to one another, you don't see the kind of longitudinal, the kind of over time differences. With that, I will probably play a relatively minor role in the discussion, because the main purpose tonight is to get the committee's response. I've had plenty of time to talk to staff, and now we are having a public discussion about a template that's been provided. Does the city manager or the finance director have any comment at this particular point?
Kathy, have you comment? I have one.
We don't.
Thank you, Chair Petal. The main comment would be that based on the direction that we got after the last meeting on this topic, as you indicated, we received suggestions from you and both committee member Verbic. So what Finance Director Haley and I did is look through those documents, and Director Haley was able to try to take one from the group that you had recommended and one from the group that committee member Verbic had recommended, and kind of merge those into the document before you tonight. So what we're hopeful from the committee members tonight is to look at this and tell us what is not in this document that you want to see in this document, because we view this as the foundation that we'll build up from. So if there's particular criteria, data, other sections or areas that you want to see in here, that's our hope to find out tonight, because when we met the several times with Chair Petal, our goal then is to start putting together this document and bring it to you at a later date. And we didn't want to just start compiling this document without your input and quote unquote miss the mark. So that's our goal, unless Director Haley, unless there's anything else you want to add to that.
And we've agreed that fiscal year 18, we intend to have a document to use in fiscal year 18, but that's going to be a pilot document. So we're going to put something together with all of us putting our heads together in the committee, reacting. And it will not be in the final form. We may find that it works very well. We may find that it doesn't work very well. We'll also get council's input in the particular process. But one of the key things is that a 5-year financial plan is longer than any single elected official's term. And therefore, by rolling from year to year your strategic financial plan, what you're doing is you're providing some amount of stability and sustainability to the financial process. So with that, I think we'll open it up to the committee for reactions.
Tom has his view.
Thank you. First off, it's great that we finally got to the point where we're talking about this 5-year strategic plan. We've talked about this, I think, from a committee recommendation, probably 2 years. So, with the half-year budget and all the other things happening, it's been a dynamic period for staff. But I think to get the primary goal in my perspective of things is to have this dialogue kick off as to the sustainability of our existing operation, our ability to generate long-term capital needs, if you will, and to rationalize really what's currently occurring, what's our current expenses, what's our trends, what's our revenue, what's our trends. Do we have a sustainable budget, or do we have a structural deficit? In our 5-year forecasting method that Director Haley had been providing us, it appears we had a structural deficit. With the revenue streams coming in over the projected time frame and what we've seen in the last 24 to 36 months, we raised some questions and adjusted the budget accordingly. So to the extent that provides, I think, an excellent set of discussion points for the new council and the new mayor, to provide a general guidance as to the difficulties, the size of them, when you're going into labor negotiations or you're looking at any aspect of structural reform, as we look at comparatives, and I know the minutes do talk about comparatives, and that's an important point from my perspective, is that we're going to compare ourselves to like communities, maybe some university communities, and I know there's a long discussion about that, but median incomes, and where we sit, I think are an essential element to the discussion about trends. What we were doing 10 years ago and what our population looked like then and what we were capable of and what we find ourselves facing today on a go-forward basis, and the trends with NIU student population, which to me would be a huge driver here to the forecast and to the risks associated with whatever scenarios we develop. So, if it's going to be medium, low, high, good, bad, so that a mayor and the council can really see how we sit and how sensitive the labor decisions, be they hiring, staffing, and how sensitive those are to what's occurring in the current operations and so forth. Those are all questions that I would hope would come out about this, as to how sensitive we are to the ups and downs of the economy. The state of Illinois, the state of NIU, state of higher education, all of those come into play in a discussion like that. So those are some of the things that I had. And I know capital needs have been a discussion point, and I know the Finance Advisory Committee, some of us at least, had indicated it's very difficult to add another round of tax increases in a sustainable support of capital without rationalizing everything that we're doing. And why don't we, in our community, 40,000 people, why aren't we, with the tax rates that we have, generating enough revenue to support those needs? And how are other communities accomplishing that task? Do they have higher tax rates? Do they have higher median income generating, local sales taxes that provide enough revenue? Is it the fact that inflation and CPIs are only at 1.5%, 2%? If we're giving 2.5% raise to staff and medical's going up at 6 or 7, and pensions are going up faster than that, the combined cost, 80% of the operation being employment, is going up at 6 to 7%. If you're generating 2 or 1, that is a long-term projected deficit for an extended period of time until we change something, economic growth, of course, being part of that solution. But I think those would be the things that I'd be hoping the questions we would try to answer in this development. I saw the document, and it's very, very well done, and I'm sure it's probably multi-year generated in that it's really pretty and substantive, and I don't know, we need to be quite so much on that part of it, is to get the baselines right and get the data right and help us in this budget projection.
I think it's important to contextualize again what we're doing. We have at least 3 different pieces that were mentioned by Member Tarazinski that I don't want to lose all those pieces. There's the 5-year forecasts, which the plan is not a substitute but a complement for those forecasts. And in addition to that, and part of the reason for the delay in getting to tonight is that the capital improvements plan, the capital improvements program, the capital budget are also integral parts of anything that you do with respect to setting yourself up for a 5-year financial plan.
As far looking through the sample report that was provided, just in general, the structure of it, I think that's a really amazing report. And I think it's a good thing for the city to produce. I think it's a good thing for taxpayers to. Sorry. I think it's a good thing for taxpayers to look at. I think it's something that is going to facilitate some transparency between the advisory committee, the city, and the taxpayers. With regard to your point, as far as coming up with accurate projections and for producing this plan, one thing I haven't heard mentioned and something that's going to be very important are what's going to be the effect of the property tax caps to the city over the next 5 years. I think we need to trend the property values, guesstimate how the economy has kind of changed, but those do have an effect over time, and something that this document doesn't reflect, but something.
The city's home rule. So as of now, they don't have a property tax cap. However, there is a possibility that a freeze comes in. So we do have to be keenly aware of that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much, all of you who worked on this. Woo! Thank Mike Verbeek, who isn't here. Thank you to you. Thank you to you. I know this was a lot of work. It takes a great deal of effort to find these examples, and I am very much appreciative. I think having a good document that shows a projection where you have baselines and then you've made, as we've talked about for years, Kathy, most likely best worst scenarios that are based on really comprehensive assumptions. It is wonderful. It can give you so much guidance so that you can anticipate problems instead of just reacting to them after they've already sat on you. And I was just so pleased with this. I read through it, was very enthusiastic. And may I just say just a few things, notes that I jotted down to myself while I was going through. Please, do you guys mind if I just flip through in the order of the report?
No, can you tell us the pages too, so we'll mark them?
You know, if, oh, there are pages, yeah. Is that the 2.2 number, like down in the lower right?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Probably some things, please excuse me, I may repeat myself, but, you know, repetition's not always a bad thing. Page 2.2, as I said, I was delighted to see this. This kind of document is a wonderful tool. I did want to say something about the elements of the plan on page 2.2, and I will come back to this later, but I want to encourage us to not limit ourselves too tightly on the idea of an economic position, because there's so many things that go into generating that economic position. And demographics is, and several aspects of demographics, that's one of those. And as several of these three folks have already said things about this, and I want to explicitly say it one more time, DeKalb may be somewhat unique because our major employer is how things go for them, NIU, is somewhat related to the state of Illinois. And then I think the second largest grouping of employers in the town, it may be all the health related and hospital folks. And because of the way the state of Illinois has chosen to insure its employees, it's self-employed, that's tied up with the state also. So for instance, we've got all those terrible lags for all the medical service providers. So our economy is, because the two largest segments of employers, the largest and the largest group together, those are both tied with the health, strength, promptness of the state of Illinois. We've got to keep that in mind. That's a real important thing for us as far as how well things go for us. I do, one thing that I don't want to go on and on about, but I will request, and I will help you get this data. I have already got some of it. I did notice that in this shell, which is, you know, just a place to begin, much of the I noticed several places where demographic data started in, stopped, in 2010, which was, of course, the last national big census. But we may have had a supplemental census that we paid for since then. No? Okay. Well, in any case, the U.S. Census Bureau does do estimates that are published so that we could have a little more data to work with, because as we all know, a trend line may be going like this and all of a sudden it can do that. So we don't want to get caught unawares like that. On page 3.1, I got kind of amused when it was talking about schools, and I thought, well, I hope you guys aren't trying to tell us something in kind of a clever way, including schools in here. But this is just a shell, an example. And one thing that I did think about, though, is that the school system might be able to give us data that we didn't have to dig up that could be used as proxies of directions that the population is going. As far as the number of the students that are enrolled in each grade, like if you've got a whole bunch of kindergartners and first graders, you know where that demographic trend is going. how many children need to be on the programs for the supplemental lunch and breakfast programs, because if the population, whatever the population we have, I'm sure we want to serve that population as best we possibly can. So if there's changes that the school system might be able to just tell us about immediately, we wouldn't have to go dig it up.
Let me just interject that if we do that, we should also try to contact whatever information we can get from places like Cornerstone and St. Mary's and the like.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. On 4.1 page, I think, Tom, you mentioned this, and this is something, these are data that we can easily get. If you look, since NIU's students who live in DeKalb are included in our census figures, keeping an eye on that number, the on-campus student enrollment, or if you might have a cordial enough relationship that you could get institutional research over at NIU to give you the numbers of the students who are living in the residence halls. And at the most, that's a 1-year lag. So that would be a real easy way to get some better indication of what you're really dealing with as a population. And down there at the bottom of that page, that is a fabulous example of some of the stuff Tom was talking about, because he was talking about income levels and household income levels. It could be per capita or however you want, but that's just fabulous.
In theory, we should be able to get the number of off-campus students that are living in DeKalb as well. We can get the residence halls.
Whatever we can talk
Yes,
institutional
absolutely.
research into giving us.
Right,
Yes,
exactly.
yes. Oh, and something else that, now this might be a big ask, but it's possible. To avoid violating anyone's privacy or confidential information, they've got huge databases of their employees over there, but you can strip names off and addresses off and do a sort by zip code. And you could get the number of employees and the salary levels, so that would give you more income data and more employment data. And that way you wouldn't harm anybody's privacy, and it would be good, solid, like right up to the minute data. And the reason I'm especially concerned about that is I bet everybody in this room is aware of some of the changes that appear to be coming down the pike as far as employment levels. If my understanding is correct, there may be some downward trends in employment that would definitely affect us, I would expect.
Before you go further,
Yeah.
do any of you think we could get that same data from the school district?
Probably, all you got to do is strip the names and the addresses off.
See,
That's public information.
Yeah, we're paying their salary, but
Yes,
yeah, but you got to protect privacy
Yeah.
regardless. Yeah,
the zip code data you should be able to get
Right.
without a question.
Right.
It won't be perfectly clean, but it would be
It'd be pretty
it'd be pretty
good.
clean. The compensation data is more complex. Well, it's more complex, but you could get a number. Now, how good that is in terms of extra compensation and the way that
You're getting
things
down in the
are
weeds, and I'm
no,
still at
no,
30,000
that's what I'm
feet.
saying. What I'm saying is, if nothing else, okay, the virtue of what Lynn is suggesting is that even if it's not perfect
Yep.
at a
It'd be
given point in
pretty
time,
good.
but if you collect it over years,
There you go.
then you see the changes because it will have the same kinds of
Cumulative
noise
effect,
in
right.
it. So
Right,
that's
the
a good-
noise is going to be consistent, good, reliable noise. So
It'll
that,
be consistent. yeah.
because the trends really are
What's-
very, very
I
important.
agree.
On page 4.4. Oh, I was just going to repeat myself about the compounding effects that we've got, since both of our largest employer groups have some connection with the state of Illinois, so we've really got to watch that. And darn it, you know, the state situation is particularly affecting, because it not only is affecting our income, it's affecting possibly our outgo, because if I understand correctly, many of the social service programs are the ones that are not currently being paid. They're not one of the court mandated things they gotta pay. So somebody's got to pick up the slack and take care of folks. The MAP grants aren't getting funded. So anyhow, it's putting a great deal more stress on the potential needs that our population has, which is another reason to really carefully track who exactly what our population looks like and how it's changing. On 5.1, here is where they're talking about these folks in this example they give, you know, they show about their anticipating structural imbalances, which is really what we're looking at and hoping to try to do something to lessen the bad effects of. It's something else that's been on my mind, and you guys may laugh at me for this, but that's okay. I've been more and more aware of how many folks I know are moving into Oakcrest and places like that. They're getting to be more of us folks here in the town also that are in the age group that's considered needing things, elder services, public transit, and that's another stressor. You know, which is just like, oh, darn, give me a break, because you're worried about your tax revenues being stagnant or perhaps declining, and then you're looking at these people needing more help, so your expenditures are going up, and it's like, oh. But anyhow, if we can at least anticipate this and take steps to try to see our way out of it, that's the important thing. Let's see, that page is redundant. Oh, I wrote this down on the expenditures page, that's page 5.6. Let's see, I believe it started last summer when, or late last spring, when Chief Lowry was talking to us about his observations about crime statistics changes. I think that it might not be a bad idea to consider including at least a subcategory about crime under expenditures, because crime costs not only us as a city and as a community, it costs families, it costs individuals. And if we are having an uptick in crimes, we need to track it, whatever it is. That's another trend I think would serve us to keep an eye on. And something else, pardon me, that affects all our businesses and all our homeowners is if and when crime stats tick up, if they don't come back down, we're all going to see our insurance costs go up on our homes and our businesses and property and casualty. Sadly, I have some loved ones in places that are not as safe as we are, and so hearing them tell about what they have to pay on home, business, casualty, automobile, because it affects automobile insurance too. So I don't think we should overlook, although you may think I'm a little wacky, darn it, that all goes in the mix and it affects things. On page 5.10, oh my goodness, I already pulled that out of the bag already, sorry, because I was going to say, that's talking about the schools and your suggestion about Cornerstone and all those places. Those are wonderful ways to be able to anticipate some of your population trends. I know when I was over at the U and we were trying to figure out some things about enrollment, we would always look at how many people got born 18 years before. So it's the same kind of thing. I'm almost done. Thank you for bearing with me. The last thing that I jotted down here on page 6.1 was something that my colleagues here have mentioned. We do need to be so careful to be cognizant of pension costs and where those are going, and healthcare costs and where those are going as well. I will say, I will repeat myself on one more thing, and then I'll stop. I do feel that it is extremely important, when at all possible, to try to get the most recent data, at least good, solid estimates on any kind of income and demographic data, any sort of thing like that, because that's what we're going to base part of what we're going to base our projections and use as a foundation for our decisions. And I am sincere, I have been trained in this. I will actually be glad to help you find good, solid data.
Great.
It's that important to me. And I've got a lot of it in my pocket already.
I'm writing this down.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for a very thorough vetting of this template. I think one of the things that is important is that we look at the opportunities in some of what you said. If we have local people who are moving out of their homes and either downsizing or moving into some kind of the many assisted care facilities that we have, that opens up existing housing for new families to come in, and that could also have an influence on the schools and the demand for services.
That's the thing about this sort of investigation. Sometimes you don't realize where you're going to wind up, but you discover something along the way that's like, oh, why didn't I think of that before? And it's not all bad news. Of course,
no.
there's good news in
No.
there.
Yeah.
Yes, you have to be open to it, but yeah.
It's a challenge. No question. No question about that. Yeah. Tom?
Thank you. Second round?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. A couple things that were mentioned I'd like to reiterate and maybe even be maybe a little more specific if we're going to get to that level. Pension forecast. I know there was a lot of discussion at our budget time on pensions, what the current forecast is, and based on those assumptions. I would hope they would provide you a 5-year forecast as to what those pension increases are going to be, percentage or dollar amount, however they do that. Right? I mean, given
Are
our
you talking about our actuary?
Yeah, I guess if we stated it simply, if we assume they're 100% accurate on the assumptions, what will our pension costs be by year for the following 5 years? 'Cause
Yeah,
there
I
was
mean,
some-
I've worked very closely over the last year with Foster and Foster. He's been extremely helpful.
Good.
Obviously, he's more knowledgeable than myself on that
Sure.
issue, so.
Yeah, we'd have to ask him.
Yeah, absolutely, but we also have to provide him with information, on our general makeup of our pension, if we know people who are coming up for retirement, who might be retiring, who, new people coming on. It's all factored into
Yeah.
with those assumptions, so.
Does he not have our actual employment roster and
He
their-
does. We provide it to him every year.
So he's got the ages, he knows, okay, and so they got,
Yep.
yeah, okay.
Well, and it's important, I think, that we ask the actuary, because of exactly what you've talked about, that we'd like to know how robust the estimate is. So, given the actuarial assumptions that they're making, apart from
Right.
the information that the city gives them, if they're assuming, let's just pull a number, if they're assuming a 4% rate of return, what difference does it make in terms of our projected liability
Right.
if they say 3 or 5?
Exactly, they should go, yeah,
Right.
so that we get some ranges. Because I know it's dynamic and it's
Right.
high, right? It's a huge driver from a cost standpoint. On the comparative data, I would hope we would have some checkpoints on this, that we, and I don't know what our schedule's going to be, but I would hope some of the data would come back to us on a monthly basis. I don't want to go 6 months and try to get a document all put together. I would suggest we get some checkpoints on some major pieces and make sure we're going where we think we're going. Like the comparable cities, what are they and who we're going to use, and what are the questions we're asking them and so forth. As an example, Director Haley had put together a reasonably comprehensive tax rate comparative for 15 communities, maybe. I don't know how many there were on that matrix. You had a nice big matrix. To me, that's an excellent starting point for a rationalization of our revenue streams, and are we getting them all, or are there pieces that we're missing? Is there some we could raise to help us get out of this structural deficit? You know, we know we're going to face some difficult times, right? So looking at the positive side of what we can attack there. And if there are, then that enables us to, in the options section of this document, talk about what, okay, now what, right? What are our options? What can we do to attack it? And so forth. So to me, that was a good comparative analysis, and I would hope we would do something like that, and again, have a checkpoint in 30 days or 45 days or a couple checkpoints before we get too far down the road.
I would just jump in, based on the previous discussions that we had with Chair Peddle. Our goal was to utilize the meeting tonight to get the data, to understand the data that you as committee members wanted, for us to start putting together the document, and then to bring the draft document compiled together to you probably, I think our goal was going to be, I think, August, I believe, off the top of my head, was the timeline that we were looking at. And then for you to look at it and submit revisions, tell us, did we hit the mark? Is there other data that you want? Do you want to look at the data differently? But this is a significant undertaking for us in collecting the data that will involve multiple departments, and it would be more logical for us to put the document together and then bring it to you for your review. And then you can look at it and say, yes, this is great. No, we want this data in addition, and then we'll just keep revising it till you're comfortable with it.
And on that particular point, I think that what's being suggested is actually a middle ground, in the sense that I understand where Mr. Tarazinski is coming from, but I think that the key point that we've made tonight is that the first version of the plan, once we've agreed on everything, the first version of the plan still is only a draft, and therefore it's a work in progress, at least for the next 18 months. So yes, I think we're gonna have multiple bites at the apple, and I agree with you that we need to do it in an iterative fashion.
Well, and again, I guess I'm pointing to new council and new mayor and so forth coming in and trying to get a picture of what's occurring here. I think the Finance Advisory Committee in some kind of joint session would be able to add some value there before too much time goes on. If it's August, I'm less concerned if it's truly going to be a first draft. And even if it's not all there, I mean, certainly understand if we get to 80% by August.
It was in that
in a
time
meaningful
period.
way.
I have to check my notes. I think it was August or September was our goal of
Well,
bringing it to you.
I remember the original draft being July that we pushed back to August. So it's right around
I'd be
there.
okay with August. Just, I guess my point is, I think we want to move it.
Don't want too much time.
Yeah, we don't want too much time. We got some momentum and some need and some real needs. I think it'll really help the discussion.
And I think in terms of Dr. Neely's point,
You can call me Lynn, we know each other, that's sweet of you.
well, I just wanted to give you the appropriate respect. But in terms of Lynn's point, after July 1, we should have more information about what FY18 looks like in Illinois. And since that's crucial, I would argue for the three biggest employers, because I suspect the school district is up there, is up there too.
They
Yeah,
are, they
right.
are. They
And,
are,
and so
yeah.
I think we have three of our largest
And
employers
it's
who are.
according to how you say what's the biggest, if you're looking at numbers or salaries.
Right, true. So, anyway. Jason, what are your thoughts on that?
Time frame wise, I definitely think the waiting until after July is probably going to be prudent to get some of this data that we're looking for.
Go ahead.
I did come up with a couple of other things over the course of this discussion. Some other things that we might want to, and I'm guessing you do such a good job with these, Kathy, you've probably already considered them, but I know we do have a couple of new projects that have been undertaken in the city. The one starting the Cornerstone project over there that's going to bring some additional revenue into the city. I know Bemis just finished reconstruction of his dealership, which I know is a larger project as far as potential sales tax revenue. I would assume that you've already accounted for these, but I just want to make sure that they are some big projects that are potentially going to bring some additional revenue into into this year and upcoming years.
Normally, we're very conservative about assuming additional revenue.
Chickens before they hatch.
Yeah, so we kind of hold that back, but we haven't seen anything for FY18 yet. But normally, we would try to underestimate the revenue that might come, because you can have downsides that can occur overnight.
That you never anticipate.
Right, yeah.
One other thing too, flipping back to 5.1 in the sample report that we have, where it's showing like a breakdown of the structural imbalance. I don't really like the thought of throwing people under the bus, but the state of Illinois in particular has not been really good about paying bills. So I don't know if it would be helpful to show people on the report, but considering that not just the city and the advisory committee is going to be looking at this report, might want to show people exactly what that shortcoming is. So we have, we have this structural imbalance to overcome, but sorry to say, X percent of it is because of the state.
Just explaining where some of the different aspects of the difficulty, the challenges.
I believe that covers the rest of what I found.
I'm good at this point. If we hit August, I think not too much time will elapse, and the council will just be seated. So I think that's a good draft date to shoot for. The comparable communities that we're talking about, do we have those? Do we know what we're going to use there for data?
Didn't you get a shorter
for
list of
rationalizing?
them?
Yeah, it was in the packet last July.
Last
I know it's
July,
been a
right.
while. I'd be happy to send that memo back out if you want to see it.
Can you just
Because it
remind me?
had the, I can't remember.
It
all
Did
of
we
was
them.
have
a shorter
university-
list, though.
And
yeah,
there's universities that were
Some
included in
account-
that,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
so
I think there's two areas, and correct me if I'm wrong, Director Haley. So the first set of data that you look at as far as comparable communities is the set of municipalities as determined in the paying compensation study from 2
Correct.
years ago, that really we would look at in what are the pay and benefits for our employees. And then based on the discussion with the committee, then that second set of comparables, we would look at pulling in the university committees when you're looking at the economic data, because you wanted to see how does our EAV, how does sales taxes, how does the tax burden compare university town to university town. So that was kind of the comparables we were looking at. And I
Agreed.
think you also wanted us to pay particular attention to the particular university towns as to what was a true apples to apples comparison.
Right.
I think just from a community standpoint, and recognizing why we're saying that is the challenges we face with the NIU downturn and the student population issue is really being repeated in these university towns to a great extent. Other than U of I and maybe Illinois State, the rest of them are seeing these very similar declines in student population, which is driving, I would assume, a set of similar economic impacts to one degree or another. I think it's interesting to find out how are they solving that problem and how are they getting their money for capital, assuming they are. Is it going to fall out in those tax rates? Is it going to fall out in median income? Or how are they achieving those objectives? So I'm more than willing to copy and paste those solutions right into our suggestions, if there are some.
If there are some.
Yeah.
Right.
Nor do I. We don't have anything more?
No, we're going to take the direction and we're going to put together a draft strategic 5-year financial plan that we'll bring back to you for your review. As Chair Petal has indicated, we view this as the first step in a multi-year process. So this will be, the first draft will be for fiscal year 18, and then we'll refine it so that a year from now, by fiscal year 19, it's an even more sound financial document that I think is going to address the needs of the committee and the council.
Is it appropriate to?
I defer to Director Haley. It's, I think she shared it with the
With us.
committee.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. On behalf of the committee, I'm sure I speak for the committee, we would like to thank you for your time spent with the committee and on behalf of the city of DeKalb. And we wish you well in your new endeavor closer to where you live, too.
Well, I would just say thank you. It's certainly been a pleasure working for the city. It's been a pleasure working with this committee. A great pleasure working under the direction of Anne Marie and the executive team she's built. As far as this plan, I would just want to add that, and especially because our IT director is out sitting in the audience, we are also working on looking at a new ERP system that I think we really need a solid, better tool to do some forecasting to be able to show different scenarios so that it's not such a manual process, that we can tweak it and say, if it's 2% pay increase, what that does to our reserves. Is it a 1.5? What it does to our reserves. So that tool is also, I think, key to this document. I think this document also is very economic development driven as well as financial. So it is a culmination of several different departments, and I think once it's completed in the next many months, I hope it serves the needs of the city.
I think it's important also for transparency purposes in a document like this to talk about what are semi-hard numbers that are based upon negotiated changes in compensation. I think we have a couple of union contracts that have been either in process or completed recently, and
All have been recently approved by the council.
and so that would be part of
Yes.
the assumptions that are made in a 5-year financial plan. Okay. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move.
Second.
Non-debatable, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you very much.